Linda Harrington thought she was protecting her neighborhood when she called the police on a homeless black man, convinced he didn't belong in her pristine world. But what she didn't know was that this man was far more than he appeared. When the officer arrived, the situation took an unexpected turn that left everyone speechless. But before we dive into this shocking story, let me know where you're watching this from. Drop your city or country in the comments below. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across Briar Hollow Park, painting the manicured lawns and pristine walkways in hues of amber and gold. Linda Harrington's heart raced as she clenched her phone, her eyes fixed on the disheveled figure of Marcus Evans near the park's edge. Linda stood frozen in her designer heels, her comfortable world suddenly feeling disrupted by the sight of Marcus setting up a makeshift camp. Fear gripped her chest as she watched him unroll a tattered sleeping bag beneath a sprawling oak tree. Without a second thought, she dialed 911. "There's a suspicious man in Briar Hollow Park," Linda whispered urgently into the phone. "He looks dangerous. Please hurry." As she ended the call, Linda noticed other parkgoers giving Marcus a wide berth. Some hurried away, clutching their children's hands tightly. Others shot disapproving glances in his direction. Linda felt a mixture of relief and vindication. She wasn't the only one who saw the threat. Within minutes, police sirens pierced the air. 2 patrol cars pulled up to the curb, and officers spilled out, hands hovering near their holsters. Linda's chest swelled with a sense of righteous satisfaction. Officer Ramirez, a stocky man with kind eyes, approached Marcus first. "Sir, we've received a complaint about your presence here. Can I see some ID?" Marcus slowly reached into his worn jacket pocket, his movements deliberate and non-threatening. "I'm not causing any trouble, officer. Just looking for a place to rest." As Marcus handed over his ID, Ramirez's eyes widened in recognition. "Marcus Evans, 75th Ranger Regiment." Marcus nodded, a flicker of surprise crossing his weathered face. Ramirez's demeanor softened immediately. "I was with the 101st Airborne. What brings you out here, brother?" Linda watched in disbelief as the tension dissipated. The other officers relaxed their stances, following Ramirez's lead. "Hard times, sir," Marcus replied, his voice low and gravelly. "Can't seem to get back on my feet since coming home." Ramirez nodded, understanding etched in the lines of his face. "Listen, there's a shelter not far from here. Good people. They have resources for vets. Let me give you a ride." Marcus hesitated, pride warring with desperation in his eyes. "I appreciate it, but I don't want to be a burden." "Nonsense," Ramirez insisted. "It's the least I can do for a fellow soldier." As Ramirez helped Marcus gather his meager belongings, Linda felt a knot forming in her stomach. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. The threat should have been removed, not coddled. She strode towards the officers, her heels clicking against the pavement. "Excuse me, but aren't you going to do something? He can't just camp out in our park." Ramirez turned to her, his expression a mixture of disappointment and barely concealed frustration. "Ma'am, Mr. Evans hasn't broken any laws. We're helping him find appropriate accommodations." Linda felt her face flush with indignation. "But he's clearly not from around here. He doesn't belong, dash." She cut herself off, suddenly aware of the growing crowd of onlookers. Some had their phones out, recording the interaction. A young woman with vibrant curls stepped forward, her phone pointed directly at Linda. "Wow, way to show your true colors, lady. What? A black man can't exist in your precious park without being a threat." Linda recoiled as if slapped. "That's not what I meant. I was just concerned about safety, dash." "Yeah, right," the woman scoffed. "Because a homeless vet is so much more dangerous than all the entitled rich folks around here." As the crowd murmured in agreement, Linda felt her carefully constructed world begin to crumble. She turned on her heel and strode away, trying to maintain her composure even as shame and anger warred within her. From the sidelines, Renee Parker watched the scene unfold with a mixture of sadness and resignation. As a social worker at the local community center, she'd seen this story play out too many times before. But there was something about Marcus that tugged at her heart. She made a mental note to check on him at the shelter later. Linda's phone buzzed incessantly as she power-walked home, her mind reeling from the confrontation. By the time she reached her sprawling Victorian, her social media notifications had exploded. The video of her interaction with Marcus and the police was going viral, with comments ranging from disappointment to outright fury. She slammed the front door behind her, leaning against it as she tried to catch her breath. This couldn't be happening. She was Linda Harrington, respected executive and pillar of the Briar Hollow community. How had she become the villain in this story? As night fell, Marcus settled into a narrow cot at the shelter, the unfamiliar surroundings setting his nerves on edge. He'd grown accustomed to sleeping rough, always alert for danger. The kindness of Officer Ramirez had caught him off guard, opening a floodgate of emotions he'd long kept buried. He reached into his jacket pocket, pulling out a crumpled photograph. A younger version of himself smiled back, arm wrapped around a beaming teenage girl. Gosh, his little girl, not so little anymore. The ache in his chest threatened to overwhelm him. "I'm sorry, baby," he whispered to the photo. "I'm trying to find my way back to you." Across town, Linda tossed and turned to her king-sized bed, unable to shake the feeling that her life was spiraling out of control. She'd always prided herself on her success, on rising above her working-class roots to become someone of importance. Now, with one impulsive phone call, it all felt like a house of cards ready to collapse. Her phone chimed with a new email notification. Heart pounding, she opened it to find a message from her company's HR department. "Ms. Harrington, in light of recent events and the negative attention brought to our organization, we request that you take a leave of absence effective immediately. We will be conducting an internal investigation into the incident at Briar Hollow Park. Please do not return to the office until further notice." Linda stared at the screen, disbelief giving way to panic. This couldn't be happening. Her job was everything. Without it, who was she? As dawn broke over Briar Hollow, both Linda and Marcus found themselves adrift, their lives irrevocably changed by a chance encounter. Neither could have predicted the journey that lay ahead, or the unlikely alliance that would form in the face of adversity. Marcus rose early, his military training still ingrained after all these years. He nodded thanks to the shelter volunteers as he accepted a cup of coffee and a simple breakfast. His mind was already racing, trying to plot his next move. He couldn't stay here forever, but the prospect of returning to the streets filled him with dread. "Mr. Evans." A gentle voice interrupted his thoughts. He looked up to see a woman with warm brown skin and kind eyes approaching his table. "I'm Renee Parker from the Community Center. I was hoping we could talk about some resources that might be available to you." Marcus tensed, years of disappointment and broken promises making him wary. But there was something in Renee's demeanor that put him at ease. "I appreciate that, ma'am, but I've been down this road before. Seems like there's always more red tape than actual help." Renee sat down across from him, her expression understanding but determined. "I know the system can be frustrating, Mr. Evans, but I promise you, I'm here to cut through that red tape. You served our country. Now it's time we served you." As they talked, Marcus felt a tiny spark of hope ignite in his chest. It was fragile, easily extinguished, but it was more than he'd had in a long time. Meanwhile, Linda stood in front of her bathroom mirror, barely recognizing the woman staring back at her. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and her usually perfectly coiffed hair hung limp around her face. She'd spent the night alternating between bouts of angry tears and frantic attempts to salvage her reputation. Her phone buzzed with another notification. Bracing herself, she looked at the screen to see a message from Nathan McGraw, one of Briar Hollow's most influential businessmen. "Linda, darling, this is quite the mess you've found yourself in. Perhaps we should discuss damage control over lunch. The club at noon." Linda's first instinct was to jump at the lifeline Nathan was offering. He had the connections and the clout to make this all go away. But as she started to type her reply, she hesitated. Was that really the answer? To sweep it under the rug and pretend it never happened? Her finger hovered over the send button, indecision paralyzing her. In that moment, she caught sight of a framed photo on her dresser. It showed a much younger Linda, fresh out of college, standing proudly in front of a community center. She'd volunteered there during school, driven by a genuine desire to make a difference. When had she lost that part of herself? With a deep breath, Linda deleted her response to Nathan. Instead, she pulled up the website for the local community center. They were always looking for volunteers. Maybe this was a chance to reconnect with the person she used to be, to make amends in a real, tangible way. As Linda and Marcus each took tentative steps towards an uncertain future, neither could have imagined how their paths would continue to intertwine. The coming days would test them both, pushing them to confront their deepest fears and prejudices. But in the crucible of adversity, the potential for true change and redemption awaited. The stage was set for a journey of transformation, not just for Linda and Marcus, but for the entire community of Briar Hollow. The ripples from their chance encounter would soon grow into waves, challenging long-held beliefs and exposing the fault lines of privilege and prejudice that ran beneath the town's picturesque surface. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, casting away the last shadows of night, both Linda and Marcus stood at the threshold of a new chapter in their lives. The road ahead was uncertain, fraught with obstacles and potential pitfalls. But sometimes, it's in our darkest moments that we find the strength to become the people we were always meant to be. Marcus Evans jolted awake, his heart pounding against his ribcage. The unfamiliar softness of the shelter bed disoriented him, memories of hard concrete and park benches still fresh in his mind. He took a deep breath, willing his racing thoughts to slow. Across town, Linda Harrington's alarm blared, dragging her from a fitful sleep. She reached for her phone, a habit ingrained over years of corporate ladder climbing. The screen lit up, revealing a flood of notifications that made her stomach churn. Local executive caught on camera in racist incident. Briar Hollow Park confrontation goes viral. Community outraged over treatment of homeless veteran. Linda's hands shook as she scrolled through the headlines. How had everything unraveled so quickly? At the shelter, Marcus sipped lukewarm coffee, his mind a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. Officer Ramirez's kindness had thrown him off balance, cracking the protective shell he'd built around himself. "You look like you're carrying the weight of the world, brother," a gravelly voice interrupted his thoughts. An older man with graying dreadlocks settled into the chair across from him. Marcus grunted noncommittally, not in the mood for small talk. The man chuckled. "I get it. Ain't easy being here. But sometimes rock bottom's the best place to rebuild your foundation." Before Marcus could respond, Renee appeared at his side. "Mr. Evans, there's someone here to see you." Confusion furrowed Marcus's brow as he followed Renee to her office. His breath caught in his throat when he saw who was waiting. "Tasha," he whispered, hardly daring to believe his eyes. His daughter stood rigidly, arms crossed. The years had changed her, hardened her in ways that made Marcus's heart ache. "I saw you on the news," Tasha said, her voice tight. "Figure I should check if you were okay." Marcus swallowed hard. I'm okay. It's good to see you, baby girl." Tasha flinched at the endearment. "Don't. I'm not here for a reunion. I needed to know you weren't dead in a ditch somewhere." The words stung, but Marcus nodded. "I understand. Thank you for coming." An awkward silence stretched between them, years of hurt and absence impossible to bridge in a moment. "I should go," Tasha said finally. "I have to get to work." As she turned to leave, Marcus found his voice. "Tasha, wait. I know I messed up, but if you ever need anything." She paused at the door, her shoulders tense. "Yeah, well, maybe you should have thought of that years ago." The door closed behind her with a soft click, leaving Marcus feeling more alone than ever. Meanwhile, Linda arrived at her office, steeling herself for the day ahead. Whispers followed her through the lobby, co-workers averting their eyes as she passed. "Ms. Harrington." Her assistant's voice trembled. "The board would like to see you immediately." Linda's stomach dropped as she entered the conference room. The grim faces that greeted her told her everything she needed to know. "Linda," the CEO began, his tone carefully neutral. "In light of recent events, we feel it's best if you take a leave of absence while we conduct an internal investigation." But Linda started to protest, but the words died in her throat. What could she say? That she wasn't the person they saw in that video? As she packed up her office, reality crashed down around her. Everything she'd worked for, everything she defined herself by, was slipping away. Back at the shelter, Marcus sat in on a support group for veterans, more out of obligation to Renee than any real hope for change. As the session wound down, the door swung open unexpectedly. Linda Harrington stood in the doorway, looking lost and out of place in her designer clothes. "I'm sorry," she stammered. "I didn't mean to interrupt. I'm here to volunteer." The room fell silent, tension thick in the air. Marcus felt his jaw clench, anger and disbelief warring within him. Renee, ever the peacemaker, stepped forward. "Welcome, Linda. We're always grateful for new volunteers. Why don't you come with me, and we'll get you started?" As Linda followed Renee out, Marcus caught snippets of whispered conversations around him. "Isn't that the lady from the video? What's she doing here?" "Probably just trying to save face." Marcus said nothing, but his mind raced. What game was this woman playing? Over the next few days, an uneasy rhythm developed. Linda threw herself into volunteer work, desperate to prove herself, while Marcus watched warily from the sidelines. The other volunteers were slow to warm up to Linda, their suspicion palpable. One afternoon, as Linda sorted through donated clothes, a fellow volunteer named Sarah approached her. "Why are you really here?" Sarah demanded, her voice low but intense. "Is this just some PR stunt to fix your image?" Linda felt her cheeks flush. "No, I'm trying to make amends. To do better." Sarah scoffed. "Right, because a few days of folding clothes makes up for a lifetime of privilege and prejudice." The argument escalated, voices rising until Renee had to intervene. Linda stormed out, tears of frustration stinging her eyes. As she sat on a bench outside, trying to compose herself, Marcus approached cautiously. "Ain't easy, is it?" he said, his voice gruff, but not unkind. "Having your whole world turned upside down." Linda looked up, startled. It was the first time Marcus had spoken to her directly since that day in the park. I'm sorry," she whispered, "for everything." Marcus nodded slowly. Words are easy. It's actions that count. Before Linda could respond, her phone buzzed. She glanced at it, her face paling as she read the message. "I've been fired," she said, her voice hollow. "Effective immediately." Marcus watched as the last vestiges of Linda's carefully constructed world crumbled around her. Despite everything, he felt a twinge of empathy. "Rock bottom's a bitch," he said quietly. "But like that old man told me, sometimes it's the best place to rebuild." As Linda grappled with her new reality, Marcus received news of his own. A letter, forwarded by Renee, bore his daughter's return address. With shaking hands, he tore it open, hope and fear warring in his chest. The contents, however, were far from what he'd imagined. "Dad, I'm facing eviction. I don't know what to do. I know we're not close, but I didn't know who else to turn to. If you can help, great. If not, I understand. Tosh." Marcus read the letter 3 times, his mind reeling. His daughter needed him, and he was powerless to help. The irony of it all threatened to overwhelm him. As the sun set on Briar Hollow, both Linda and Marcus found themselves at crossroads they never could have anticipated. Their paths, so different yet inexplicably intertwined, stretched out before them into an uncertain future. Linda, stripped of her job and social standing, faced the daunting task of redefining herself. The community center, once a mere attempt at redemption, now stood as her only lifeline to purpose and connection. Marcus, buoyed by the faintest hope of reconciliation with Tasha, grappled with the weight of expectations he feared he couldn't meet. The specter of his past loomed large, threatening to overshadow any progress he'd made. As night fell, Renee sat in her office, reviewing the day's events. She couldn't shake the feeling that something significant was unfolding, a story of redemption and second chances that transcended the boundaries of race and class. With a determined sigh, she picked up her phone and dialed a familiar number. "Officer Ramirez, it's Renee from the center. I think I'm going to need your help with something." The pieces were in motion, setting the stage for confrontations and revelations that would shake the foundations of Briar Hollow. As Marcus and Linda navigated their new realities, neither could have predicted the storms that lay ahead, or the unlikely alliances that would form in their wake. Marcus stood outside Tasha's apartment building, his heart pounding. The peeling paint and cracked concrete spoke volumes about the struggles his daughter faced. He took a deep breath, steeling himself for the confrontation ahead. Tasha opened the door, her eyes widening in surprise. "Dad, I didn't expect you to actually come." "I'm here, baby girl," Marcus said softly. "Whatever you need." Tasha's expression hardened. "What I need is a miracle. The landlord's giving me till the end of the week to come up with back rent, or we're out." Marcus felt a familiar weight settle on his shoulders. "How much?" $3,000, Tasha replied, her voice cracking. "Might as well be $1 million. Marcus nodded, his mind racing. "I'll figure something out. I promise." Tasha's laugh was bitter. "Like you promised to be there for my high school graduation? Or when Jamal was born?" The words stung, but Marcus held his ground. "I know I've let you down, but I'm here now. Let me try to make it right." Across town, Linda sat in her empty house, surrounded by the trappings of her former life. The silence was deafening. Her phone, once constantly buzzing with messages and notifications, lay silent. A knock at the door startled her. She opened it to find Renee standing on her porch. "Renee, what are you doing here?" The social worker's eyes were kind but determined. "We need your help at the center. There's a situation with one of our veterans." Linda hesitated. "I don't know if I should dash." "Linda," Renee interrupted, "you've been given a chance to make real change. Are you going to take it?" At the community center, Marcus paced anxiously. He'd swallowed his pride and come to ask for help, but the weight of his request felt crushing. Officer Ramirez approached, concern etched on his face. "What's going on, brother?" Marcus explained Tasha's situation, his voice tight with emotion. "I can't let her down again, but I don't know how to fix this." Ramirez nodded thoughtfully. "Let me make some calls. We might be able to dash." He was cut off by raised voices from the front of the center. Marcus and Ramirez hurried to investigate, finding a tense standoff between Linda and a well-dressed man. "Nathan, please," Linda was saying, her voice strained. "These people need our help." Nathan McGraw, Briar Hollow's most influential businessman, sneered. "These people. Come on, Linda. You can't seriously believe this little act of charity will save your reputation." Marcus felt his fists clench. He'd seen men, like Nathan before, using their power to keep others down. "It's not about reputation," Linda shot back. "It's about doing what's right." Nathan laughed coldly. "Right. Was it right when you called the cops on that homeless vet? Face it, Linda. You're one of us. Stop pretending otherwise." The room fell silent, all eyes on Linda. Marcus watched as emotions played across her face. Shame, anger, and finally, resolve. "You're wrong," Linda said quietly. "I'm not that person anymore, and I won't stand by while you exploit people who need help." Nathan's eyes narrowed. "Careful, Linda. You're playing a dangerous game." As Nathan stormed out, Renee approached Linda. "That was brave," she said softly. Linda shook her head. "It doesn't feel brave. It feels terrifying." Marcus stepped forward, surprising himself. Sometimes doing the right thing is the scariest thing of all. Linda met his gaze, a moment of understanding passing between them. The next few days were a whirlwind of activity. Linda threw herself into helping at the center, using her business contacts to secure donations and support. Marcus, with Ramirez's help, worked tirelessly to find a solution for Tasha's eviction. As the deadline approached, Marcus found himself outside Tasha's apartment once more. This time, he wasn't alone. "You sure about this?" Ramirez asked, adjusting his uniform. Marcus nodded. It's time to face the music. They knocked on the landlord's office door. A gruff voice called them in. The landlord, a heavy-set man named Frank, looked up with a scowl. What do you want? Marcus stepped forward. I'm here about my daughter's apartment, Tasha Evans. Frank's eyes narrowed. Evans. Yeah, she's out if I don't see cash by Friday. We're here to discuss alternatives, Ramirez interjected smoothly. Frank laughed. Alternatives? Unless you've got $3,000, there's nothing to discuss. Marcus felt his temper rising. There has to be something we can work out. She's a single mother, for God's sake. Not my problem, Frank sneered. Maybe if her deadbeat dad had been around, she wouldn't be in this mess. The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. Before he could react, Frank continued. You know what? I'm done playing nice. Tell your daughter she's out. Today. Marcus saw red. He lunged forward, grabbing Frank by the collar. You heartless son of a dash. Marcus, stop. Ramirez's voice cut through the haze of anger. Suddenly, the door burst open. Linda stood there, breathing hard, a folder clutched in her hand. I'm glad I caught you, she said, her eyes blazing with determination. Before you make any rash decisions, Mr. Landlord, you might want to take a look at this. She slapped the folder down on Frank's desk. It seems your building isn't up to code. Quite a few violations here. It would be a shame if the housing authority found out, wouldn't it? Frank's face paled as he flipped through the documents. Where did you get these? Linda smiled grimly. Let's just say I still have some friends in high places. Now, about Tasha's lease. An hour later, Marcus, Linda, and Ramirez stood outside the building, still processing what had happened. I can't believe it, Marcus said, his voice thick with emotion. How can I ever thank you? Linda shook her head. Don't thank me. This is what I should have been doing all along. Ramirez clapped Marcus on the shoulder. Go tell your daughter the good news, brother. As Marcus headed upstairs, Linda turned to Ramirez. There's something else you should know. I've been doing some digging, and I think there's more to this story than just one greedy landlord. Ramirez raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? Linda took a deep breath. I think Nathan McGraw's company is behind a lot of these evictions. They're buying up properties all over Briar Hollow, pushing out low-income residents. Ramirez whistled low. That's a serious accusation, Linda. I know, she replied. But if it's true, we have to do something. As they discussed their next steps, neither noticed the sleek black car parked across the street, its tinted windows concealing the figure of Nathan McGraw, watching them with narrowed eyes. Upstairs, Marcus knocked on Tasha's door, his heart in his throat. When she opened it, he saw the fear and resignation in her eyes. It's okay, baby girl, he said softly. You don't have to leave. We worked out. Tasha's eyes widened in disbelief. What? How? As Marcus explained, he saw something shift in Tasha's expression. The wall of anger and hurt began to crack, just a little. Dad, she said, her voice wavering. I don't know what to say. Marcus reached out, tentatively placing a hand on her shoulder. You don't have to say anything. Just let me be here for you. For real this time. Tasha hesitated for a moment, then stepped forward, wrapping her arms around her father. As Marcus held his daughter close, feeling the weight of years of absence and pain between them, he made a silent vow. He would make this right, no matter what it took. Down in the street, Linda and Ramirez continued their hushed conversation, unaware of the forces aligning against them. Nathan McGraw picked up his phone, his voice cold and calculated. It's me. We have a problem. That Harrington woman is sticking her nose where it doesn't belong. It's time to remind her of her place. As night fell over Briar Hollow, the pieces were set for a confrontation that would shake the town to its core. Marcus, Linda, and their unlikely alliance stood on the brink of uncovering a truth that could change everything. But the road ahead was fraught with danger, and the price of justice might be higher than any of them were prepared to pay. In the quiet of her apartment, Tasha tucked her son into bed, her mind reeling from the day's events. As she kissed Jamal's forehead, she whispered a quiet prayer of thanks. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to feel a glimmer of hope. Meanwhile, Marcus sat on a bench outside the community center, staring up at the stars. The weight of responsibility settled on his shoulders, but it felt different now. It felt like purpose. Linda, unable to sleep, pored over documents spread across her dining room table. As she connected the dots of Nathan's real estate empire, a chill ran down her spine. The truth was uglier than she'd imagined, but she was determined to see it through. Across town, Officer Ramirez sat in his patrol car, lost in thought. He joined the force to protect and serve, but the lines between right and wrong had never seemed so blurred. As Briar Hollow slept, unaware of the storm brewing in its midst, for unlikely allies prepared to face a battle that would test their courage, their convictions, and the very fabric of their community. The road ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear: nothing would ever be the same again. Linda stood before the mirror, adjusting her blouse for the 5th time. The woman staring back at her bore little resemblance to the polished executive she'd been just months ago. Her eyes, once sharp with ambition, now held a softer, more introspective glow. A knock at the door startled her from her reverie. She opened it to find Nathan McGraw, his smile as slick as his tailored suit. "Linda, darling," he purred. "Ready for your big comeback?" She forced a smile. "Nathan, I appreciate the opportunity, but dash." Now, he interrupted, steering her towards his waiting car. "No time for cold feet. This interview is your ticket back to the top." As they drove to the TV studio, Linda's stomach churned. The script Nathan had given her fell wrong, reducing Marcus to a prop in her redemption story. Across town, Marcus stood outside Tasha's apartment, a brightly wrapped package clutched in his trembling hands. Today was Jamal's birthday, and Tasha had reluctantly invited him to the party. He raised his hand to knock, then hesitated. What right did he have to be here, after all these years? The door swung open, revealing Tasha's surprised face. "Dad, I didn't think you'd come." Marcus swallowed hard. "I promised I'd be here. I'm done breaking promises." Tasha's expression softened slightly. "Well, come on in. Jamal's been asking about you." As Marcus stepped inside, the sounds of children laughing and music playing washed over him. For a moment, he felt overwhelmed by the normalcy of it all, a life he'd missed out on for so long. Jamal spotted him from across the room, his face lighting up. "Grandpa." As the little boy barreled into his legs, Marcus felt something inside him crack open. Tears pricked at his eyes as he knelt down, hugging his grandson for the first time. "Happy birthday, little man," he whispered. At the TV studio, Linda sat in the makeup chair, her mind racing. The interviewer, a sharp-eyed woman named Diane, was going over the talking points with Nathan. "So, we'll focus on Linda's journey of self-discovery," Diane was saying. "How she's learned from her mistakes and is now dedicating herself to helping the less fortunate." Nathan nodded approvingly. "Perfect. And we'll mention how she's been working closely with Marcus Evans, the homeless veteran she initially misjudged." Linda's head snapped up. "Wait, what? We never discussed bringing Marcus into this." Nathan's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Come now, Linda. His story is what makes your redemption arc so compelling. The public loves a good transformation tale." As Linda opened her mouth to protest, her phone buzzed. A text from Renee. "Urgent. Call me ASAP." Excusing herself, Linda ducked into a quiet corner. Renee's voice was tight with urgency. "Linda, you can't do this interview. We've uncovered something big. Nathan's company, it's not just buying up properties. They're actively pushing out low-income residents, especially veterans like Marcus." Linda felt the floor drop out from under her. "What? How do you know this?" "Officer Ramirez has been digging. There's a paper trail, Linda, and it leads straight to Nathan McGraw." As the pieces fell into place, Linda felt a surge of anger and determination. She knew what she had to do. Back at Tasha's apartment, the party was winding down. Marcus helped clean up, stealing glances at his daughter as she moved around the room. Dad, Tasha said softly, catching him off guard. I'm glad you came. Marcus's heart swelled. Me too, baby girl. I know I can't make up for lost time, but if you'll let me, I'd like to try. Tasha's eyes glistened with unshed tears. It's not going to be easy. There's a lot of hurt between us. I know, Marcus nodded, but I'm not running away this time. Whatever it takes, I'm here. As they shared a tentative hug, Marcus's phone rang. It was Linda, her voice urgent. Marcus, I need your help. It's about Nathan McGraw and the evictions. We have a chance to expose everything, but I can't do it alone. Marcus looked at Tasha, torn between his newfound connection with his family and the chance to fight for justice. Tasha met his gaze, understanding dawning in her eyes. Go, she said softly. Do what you need to do. We'll be here when you get back. With a grateful nod, Marcus headed out, determination in every step. At the TV studio, chaos reigned. Linda stood before the cameras, off-script and unstoppable. I came here today thinking I could salvage my reputation, she began, her voice steady. But I've realized that true redemption isn't about saving face. It's about doing what's right, no matter the cost. Nathan lunged for the camera, but Officer Ramirez stepped in, blocking his path. Linda continued, laying out the evidence of Nathan's corrupt practices, the systematic displacement of veterans and low-income families, all in the name of profit. As she spoke, Marcus arrived, taking his place beside her. His presence, dignified and resolute, spoke volumes. This man, Linda said, gesturing to Marcus, taught me more about integrity and resilience in a few months than I learned in years of climbing the corporate ladder. It's time we stop seeing people as problems to be solved or profits to be made, and start recognizing the humanity in each of us. The studio erupted in chaos as Nathan was led away in handcuffs, shouting threats and denials. But amidst the uproar, Linda and Marcus shared a quiet moment of triumph. You did it, Marcus said, his voice filled with respect. Linda shook her head. We did it. All of us. Together. In the days that followed, Briar Hollow was turned upside down. Nathan's empire crumbled, and a task force was established to address the housing crisis he'd exacerbated. Linda threw herself into the work, using her business acumen to help restructure the community's approach to affordable housing. Marcus, with Ramirez's support, started a program to help homeless veterans reintegrate into society. Tasha, inspired by her father's transformation, began volunteering at the community center, bringing Jamal along to spend time with his grandfather. One sunny afternoon, they all gathered in Briar Hollow Park, the very place where this journey had begun. Linda watched as Marcus pushed Jamal on the swings, Tasha laughing beside them. Renee joined her on the bench, a contented smile on her face. Who would have thought we'd end up here, huh? Linda shook her head in wonder. Certainly not me. I had no idea how blind I was, how much damage I was capable of causing. But look at how much good you've done since then, Renee pointed out. Sometimes it takes hitting rock bottom to find our true selves. As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the park, Marcus made his way over to Linda. He sat down beside her, his eyes reflecting a peace she'd never seen before. You know, he said softly, when I first came back from the war, I thought my life was over, that I'd never find my place in the world again. Linda nodded, understanding all too well the feeling of being lost. Marcus continued, but now I see that every step, even the painful ones, led me here, to my family, to this community, to a chance to make a real difference. He turned to her, his gaze intense. We're both living proof. It's never too late to do the right thing. Linda felt tears prick at her eyes as she looked out over the park at the diverse group of people now gathered there, families, veterans, volunteers, all coming together to build something new. You're right, she said, her voice thick with emotion. It's never too late, and we're just getting started. As night fell over Briar Hollow, the park glowed with the warmth of newfound connections and rekindled hope. The journey had been long and painful, but in the end, it had led to something beautiful, A community reborn, stronger and more united than ever before. Linda and Marcus stood side by side, watching as their two worlds, once so far apart, blended into one. They had started as strangers, divided by prejudice and circumstance. Now, they stood as allies, friends, and testament to the power of second chances. In that moment, surrounded by the fruits of their labor and the love of their community, they knew that this was just the beginning. The road ahead would not be easy, but together, they were ready to face whatever challenges came their way. As the stars twinkled overhead, a sense of peace settled over Briar Hollow. It was a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there is always hope. And sometimes, it takes just one person willing to stand up and do the right thing to change everything.